Okay, so I do recall that a long time ago I did an update video, and I did promise that I was specifically going to do Avatar and Legend of Korra. So this is me keeping that promise. This is going to be the Avatar video. So what exactly we're going to talk about, I'll get into it. First, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you very much. Shout out to the patrons, shout out to the subscribers, shout out to you who's ever stumbled across this video. Thank you to the editor, as always, and let's get into it. The reason why I said I wanted to do an Avatar video is because a lot of people have done Avatar videos, like picking apart their own personal feelings on all of it, and I've seen a bunch of people pick apart certain characters, and there is one person I've seen that actually wanted to do the Azula video that technically you're in right now, and they were trying to give her like what kind of personality she is. I just want to talk about this from the viewpoint of how she was raised specifically. And Azula for the show is a wonderful villain. She's cold, she's calculating, she's to the point. She makes them actually kind of scared because of how ruthless she is. But for all of her being a really good villain, I feel like until it's mentioned again, people sometimes gloss over the fact that she's 14. She is a 14-year-old girl doing all of this. And the reason why I bring this up is because the only other adults in her life that could have possibly changed her course of action were removed from her life, and she was only left with her father, who we see at the end of the series, or even before then actually, was a cold-hearted, ruthless egomaniac with a god complex. He was a narcissist. He didn't even view people as worthy of him. He viewed them as extensions of himself or how he could use them, specifically his children. Zuko was supposed to be a a fire-bending prodigy that was just as cold-hearted and ruthless as him, and Zuko was Zuko. Realistically, he was just Zuko. He was his uncle's son more than he was Ozai's son. And then he saw in him, all of his failures, and he hated his son because narcissists view their children as extensions of themselves, so all of Zuko's failures he perceived as his failures, and he didn't like it. But in his daughter, he saw a second chance, and that's why he zeroed in on her and really ruthlessly turned her into something that was cruel to animals, cruel to friends, viewed everybody as pawns in a game to further her own goals. All for his own goal, ultimately, which was to become ruler of the world, which, you know what, I'm tired of seeing that in villain tropes, ruler of the world. The world is big and vast, and it just seems like a lot of work. Anyway, when he finally gets to where he's going to become the Phoenix King, he actually doesn't even give her the Fire Lord title as an actual for realsies thank you. He gives it to her because he just doesn't want it anymore, and here, I don't want it, you can take it. And it's so deeply insidious is because Azula finally realizes, while still trying to justify it to herself, of no, he gave it to me because he loves me, and I did a lot of good work for him. She views all of it as not even furthering her own ambitions, she views it as furthering the ambition of her father, who she thinks loves her. For all that Azula is a wonderful, well-written, well-rounded villain, she is a 14-year-old girl who was raised and left in the hands of a horribly, horribly mean and abusive man who only viewed her as a tool, specifically to further his own goals. And she became what he needed her to become at the cost of her own mental health. Even if the video, that was done by Hello Future Me is correct and she had this kind of personality, it doesn't change the fact that Ozai was so unbelievably cruel that in the comics, which I finally got around to reading, which I don't even really think that I should have had to read, but also supplementary material that's still canon is still good material. I'm just mad that we never got a flashback to this of anything in Legend of Korra, but whatever, we'll take it. You find out that Ozai, I guess spoilers if you haven't read the comics, Ozai literally told his wife, if you don't do what I tell you to do, I will kill our son. And he sends her to kill his own father And it's like, bro, Azula was left in the hands of a legitimately evil person, and he molded her into being just as cruel and evil and vindictive as him. And it makes me really sad, is because Azula didn't really get to have a childhood. She was beaten and molded and gaslit, I think. Maybe. Put an asterisk on that, because I don't think we've ever seen it. Into thinking that she was doing something that was going to get her the unconditional love of her father, not realizing that he doesn't love anybody. He just wants to further his own goal. And, it's such good writing. And I mean that to say it's writing that is very subtle. It is writing that very much flies underneath your radar until you start microanalyzing and picking things apart. And I'll tell you this, right? There are things in Avatar that I would love to rip apart because that bothers me so much. But there are things that I can defend. And this is one of those weird defense videos where the more I thought about it, of trying to make this an opposition of, the more I realized I can't. Could I oppose Azula? Easy. I could do that all day long and not break a sweat. But the defense of her is harder, is because, well, she was so mean to her friends. Friends who were most likely picked out for her because they were part of the upper crust that her father wanted her to associate with, and who probably were also shoved at her because their families viewed Azula as a way of increasing their own status. Not really friends that you pick, friends that you were forced to be friends with. Those friends? Well, she was tormenting Aang and Katara and Sokka and Toph. Yes, because her father sent her on the quest that he perceived that his son had failed. Because if your brother can't do it, I'll send you after them, because I know you will not stop until you actually get it done, or until you actually for real tell me that the Avatar is for realsies dead. Proceed with your master plan. Oh, well, she was so cruel to her brother. A brother who was shown to be lowest man on the totem pole as far as her father was concerned, who she based everything off of. And so that's the reason that she was horrendously, mean to him, is because it was the status quo that she believed to be real. That brother? Well, she lost to Zuko during a mental breakdown where she literally was going through the process of realizing that everything she had done up until that point was all in service of her father, who she realized finally didn't really love her and left her for dead because he had finally achieved his quote-unquote ultimate goal, and she was having to contend with that and had a mental breakdown. So really, was Zuko a good firebender? He'd always been a good firebender. But Azula was going through it, so her loss was more to do because, in all honesty, she was having a mental breakdown, and also Katara is technically the one that beat her because water beats fire. Sorry, guys. This is Pokemon logic at this point. But there is a reason, right, why the defense of Azula is so hard, is because can I pin the blame, all of it, on Ozai and his for realsies terrible parenting? I could, until I remember Ozai probably really didn't raise Azula after he kicked out Zuko and his wife and murdered his father and sent his older brother with his disgraced son, right? Or actually, I think Zuko actually got Uncle Iroh to come with him because Uncle Iroh was like, I can't let this kid go out into the world all by himself. He'll die. Ozai probably wasn't part of the raising of Azula. More likely than not, he gave her to nursemaids and nannies and housekeepers and, staff in general to bother with the raising of her, because he wouldn't bother raising her at all. Because realistically, he just wouldn't care, and two, probably just didn't really have time for it because of all of his other stuff of running a kingdom. If and when he saw her, was probably only to sit there and tell her what she was doing good about her firebending and perpetuating his image, and then to yell at her and, trick her into thinking that she's not good enough and perfection was the only way that she could do stuff. Realistically, Ozai probably didn't raise her and it probably messed her up even more, is because by the time she actually got to talk to the parent that she wanted to talk to and listen to, and it's her only parental figure to which to get love from, and it's held behind like a paywall of do this or I'm not going to talk to you, or do this or you've disgraced the family, or the paywall of do this or I'll get rid of you like I got rid of your brother, probably didn't help her either. Until your brain is done growing, it's like silly putty, right? It's like clay. It can be molded into anything that it needs to be molded into, but if the person molding it only ever wants to beat it down into the shape that they deem correct, it doesn't really work. So, is Azula a great villain? No question asked. She was really good in her role that she had to do for Avatar, like the role she had to fill. Realistically, she's a 14-year-old girl who was left to the not even probably abusive, just uninterested, like, parenting of her father, who only viewed her as a way of furthering his own goals. Realistically, that's what it is. So for the defense of Azula, right? Like, such a weird thing to say, but it's true. For all of her being a total badass, she's a 14-year-old girl who got left alone with a man who probably didn't even really view her as a daughter and only viewed her as an extension of himself and how it could perpetuate his own goals and greatness, which isn't a way to be raised. It really isn't. So that's the defense of Azula, right? I really hope that you guys, like, understand where I'm coming from, and I hope that you guys have an amazing rest of your day. Bye-bye.